Let me start with something most people today would find hard to believe. Less than a century ago, millions of farmers and backyard growers were producing steady harvests year after year without synthetic fertilizer, without soil conditioners, and without weekly trips to the garden store. They were working poorer land than many of us have today. They had fewer machines. They had fewer products. And yet their soil kept feeding crops for decades with very little outside input. During wartime shortages, depressions and rationing, people didn't have the luxury of replacing soil fertility every season. They had to build systems that worked long-term. They created what I like to call lazy soil. Soil that does most of the work for you once it's properly established. It feeds plants, manages moisture, resists disease, and renews itself quietly in the background. Today, most of us have been trained to treat soil like a disposable growing medium. We pour fertilizer on it, grow a crop, exhaust it, and repeat the cycle. In this guide, I'm going to walk you through how older generations built living soil systems that lasted 50 years or more, why those methods disappeared, and how you can still apply them in your own garden. Before modern chemical fertilizers became widespread after World War II, most farms relied on what we now call biological fertility. That means the soil itself was alive and constantly recycling nutrients. Older farmers, they focused first on organic matter. Leaves, straw, manure, kitchen scraps, crop residues and weeds were never treated as waste. They were treated as fuel. Every season these materials were returned to the soil in layers or composted forms. Over time, this created deep, dark topsoil that functioned like a sponge and a pantry at the same time. A practical example of this can still be seen in old homestead gardens where the soil is black 12 inches down. That depth didn't happen by accident. Year after year, plant material was added back. If you want to apply this today, start by returning every non-disease plant back to your beds. Shred stalks, chop leaves, and lay them on the soil instead of hauling them away. One of the most powerful forgotten techniques was permanent mulching. Instead of leaving soil bare, gardeners kept it covered year-round with straw, leaves, hay, grass clippings, or forest litter. This blanket served three purposes. It prevented moisture loss, protected soil life, and slowly decomposed into food for plants. As the mulch broke down, worms and microbes pulled nutrients downward, building fertility without digging. In practical terms, this meant that many gardens were never fully tilled after establishment. They were simply layered. If you study old Victory Garden manuals, you'll find repeated emphasis on keeping soil covered. To use this today, begin by laying 4 to 6 inches of organic material over your beds in fall and spring. Do not mix it in. Let nature do the work. Within a year or two, you will see darker soil and better water retention. Older growers understood something modern backyard gardeners often overlook. Plants do not all take from soil in the same way. Some give back. Legumes such as peas, beans, clover and vetch, they host bacteria on their roots that actually pull nitrogen from the air and store it in the soil. Farmers, well, they use these plants deliberately to recharge tired land. Fields and gardens were rotated so that heavy feeders like corn and cabbage would follow nitrogen builders. This created a natural fertility cycle, you see. A home gardener can do the same thing on a small scale. After growing tomatoes in one bed, plant beans or peas there the following season. After harvesting them, chop the plants at ground level and just leave the roots in place. Those roots contain stored nitrogen that will feed your next crop. Another forgotten technique was trench composting. Instead of piling compost above ground, people would bury organic waste directly in planting rows or between beds. Kitchen scraps, bones, paper manure and garden waste were layered in shallow trenches and covered with soil. Over time, this created underground reservoirs of fertility. Roots grew into these zones and fed themselves. Some old gardens still show fertility patterns from trenches dug 40 years ago. To try this today, dig a trench 12 inches deep between rows in fall. Fill it with chopped organic material and cover it. Plant over it in spring. The bed will feed itself for several seasons. Certain plants were intentionally grown to improve soil structure. Alfalfa, comfrey, chicory and sunflowers sent roots several feet deep. These roots pulled minerals upward from subsoil layers that normal crops could not reach. When these plants died or were cut, those minerals were released near the surface. This was a form of free mineral supplementation. A simple modern example is planting comfrey near garden beds. Cut it 3 or 4 times a year and lay the leaves as mulch. You are recycling deep nutrients without buying anything. You know, excessive tilling destroys fungal networks, compacts soil and burns organic matter. Older farmers, well, they tilled when necessary, but avoided constant disturbance. Once beds were established, many were only lightly loosened or forked. And honestly, earthworms did most of the work. If you want long-lasting soil, you really ought to reduce deep digging. Use a broad fork or a garden fork to loosen things up without flipping the layers, right? This preserves biology and keeps fertility cycling. After the Second World War, surplus chemical industries turned toward agriculture. Fertilizers offered fast results and crops grew quickly. Yields increased, at least in the short term. But, you see, these products replace soil-building practices instead of supporting them. Organic matter declined and microbial life weakened. Farmers became dependent on annual inputs. The knowledge that once passed from father to son, well, it faded away. Convenience replaced patience. Building lazy soil is not complicated, but it does require consistency. Start by keeping your soil covered. Return organic matter constantly, rotate your crops, use legumes, compost in place, disturb the soil less. Within 3 to 5 years, most gardeners see dramatic changes. Within 10, soil becomes resilient. After 20, it can sustain itself with minimal help. This is not just theory. It is how millions of people farmed before us. In uncertain times, the ability to grow food without dependence is honestly priceless. Our grandparents understood that soil was an inheritance, not a consumable. By rebuilding these systems, we honor that knowledge and secure our own independence. If you found this guide valuable, make sure to subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who still believes in real skills, and help keep this forgotten wisdom alive for the next generation.